In early 2020, Alina Petrova, a 23-year-old transgender model, sat cross-legged on the edge of her narrow bed in a small Moscow apartment, the glow of her phone screen lighting her face. Her Instagram feed looked like another universe. Women her age smiling in designer dresses, sipping champagne in infinity pools, posting from rooftop parties with city skylines glittering behind them. Alina's heart ached with longing. Her own reality was starkly different. Born Mikhail Petrov in Rostov-on-Don, she grew up in a modest Soviet-era apartment block with peeling paint on the walls and neighbors who knew everyone's business. Her father, a stern construction worker, believed in raising a real man. Her mother, a school cook, was kind but exhausted from double shifts. From the time she was a child, Mikhail felt different, borrowing his sister's scarves, helping his mother bake, sneaking looks at glossy fashion magazines. Years later, when she moved to Moscow, she finally took her first steps toward living as her true self, beginning hormone therapy and carefully building an online presence. But her dream life, the surgeries, the freedom, the glamour always seemed just out of reach. Then one night, a message appeared in her inbox. A well-known promoter invited her to Dubai for a series of exclusive events promising free flights, luxury accommodations, and thousands of dollars in appearance fees. Alina stared at the message for a long time, her heart racing. She knew there were risks. There was no clear itinerary, no details, only secrecy, but she couldn't stop thinking about what this money could mean for her future. "This is my chance," she whispered to the mirror, her reflection staring back at her with equal parts fear and hope. She had no idea that this one decision would lead her into the darkest chapter of her life. A few weeks later, Alina stepped off a plane into the warm night air of Dubai. The airport was a blur of glass and marble, full of travelers in designer clothes, the air faintly smelling of wood and luxury perfume. Waiting at arrivals was a man in a crisp suit holding a sign with her name. "Welcome to Dubai, Miss Alina," he said with a polished smile before escorting her to a sleek black SUV. Inside were three other girls, young, beautiful, dressed for Instagram, chatting nervously in English and Russian. Their destination was a five-star hotel overlooking the Persian Gulf. The lobby gleamed under chandeliers, the floors were polished to a mirror shine. When Alina opened the door to her suite, her breath caught. A floor-to-ceiling window revealed the endless ocean, the skyline glittering like a jewel box. For a moment, all her doubts melted away. The first few days felt like living inside someone else's dream. Chauffeured limousines took them to rooftop bars and sprawling desert villas where fountains sparkled in the moonlight. There were poolside photoshoots, champagne towers, and trays of exotic fruit. Alina was given expensive dresses to wear, encouraged to take as many photos as she wanted, as long as she didn't tag the location. She began to think she had worried for nothing. The money was real. The glamour was real. Even the guests seemed polite, respectful, eager to compliment her appearance. But there were rules, strict rules. No filming the VIP guests. No wandering into private wings of the villas. No asking about other models' contracts. The organizers repeated these rules with firm smiles, and though it was never stated outright, Alina sensed that breaking them wouldn't just mean losing her pay, it would mean trouble. The first red flag appeared on the third night. One of the girls, a tall brunette named Sasha, was invited to what the organizers called a special dinner. Only two girls were chosen. Sasha seemed excited, giggling as she changed into a glittering gown and reapplied her lipstick. But when she returned hours later, she was a different person. Her makeup was smudged, her hair tangled, her face pale. She said nothing, went straight to the bathroom, and locked the door. Alina knocked softly. "Are you okay?" There was a pause before Sasha's quiet voice replied. "Private contract. Don't ask." The next day, Sasha barely spoke and refused to leave the hotel room. Soon, Alina began noticing other strange things. Brightly colored cocktails appeared at certain parties, neon green, deep purple, drinks she had never seen before. The organizers encouraged them to drink, saying it would help them relax. Some of the girls who drank came back acting oddly distant, almost hypnotized, like they had been drugged. The villas were no longer just glamorous playgrounds. Alina noticed locked doors, security guards watching them too closely, whispered conversations between staff that stopped the moment the girls entered a room. At night, as she lay in the soft hotel bed, she felt a growing unease creep over her. She started hiding her passport under the mattress, keeping her phone close, sending messages to a friend back in Moscow every few hours just to let someone know she was safe. But deep down, Alina felt something was coming, something much darker than she had ever imagined. At the end of February, the call came. "Alina," the organizer said, "you've been selected for something special. A private villa outside the city. Very exclusive, very generous pay." Alina hesitated. Every instinct told her to refuse. But this job alone could cover months of hormones and the first stage of her surgeries. "You'll be fine," the organizer assured her. "You just have to make a good impression. And remember, no phones tonight." A black SUV arrived after sunset. The driver smiled politely, but said nothing as they left the glittering city behind. The further they drove, the quieter it became, the road lit only by the headlights. Halfway there, the driver handed her a tall glass filled with a bright pink liquid. "What is this?" she asked. "Just a little something to calm your nerves," he said. She hesitated, but the driver was watching her. Slowly, she drank. Minutes later, her head felt heavy, the edges of her vision blurring. The villa appeared out of the darkness like something out of a dream. Massive gates, high walls, and guards in white robes standing silently at the entrance. Inside, it was nothing like the previous parties. No music, no laughter. The air smelled of incense and smoke. Candles flickered in long hallways. Alina's unease turned to dread. Two men approached her, speaking in a language she didn't understand. One took her arm firmly, leading her away from the main room. "Where are we going?" she asked, but they didn't answer. They led her down a narrow stone staircase, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom was a large basement lit by dim lanterns. Shadows danced on the walls. Several figures stood in a circle, whispering. One of them turned toward her and spoke sharply. Alina's heart pounded. Suddenly, hands grabbed her shoulders. Another figure appeared, blocking the way back up the stairs. And just like that, Alina realized she was trapped. Everything happened so fast. Rough hands shoved Alina to the center of the room. The circle of figures closed in around her. The smell of incense was sharp, almost choking. Someone began chanting in a low, rhythmic voice, words she didn't understand, but the tone was cold, commanding. Alina tried to speak, to ask what they wanted, but a man slapped her across the face so hard she fell to her knees. Laughter echoed around the room. "Please," she started, but someone yanked her up by the hair. She felt hands tearing at her dress, mocking voices calling her names, words like unnatural and filth. Then she saw it, a flash of metal, a knife. The light from the candles glinted off the blade. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst. They pinned her down on a cold stone surface. One man held her shoulders, another gripped her legs. "Stop, please stop," she screamed, but her voice only seemed to amuse them. The knife pressed against her skin, a sharp sting, then white-hot pain. Alina screamed until her throat burned, until her own voice sounded far away. At some point, she must have blacked out. When she woke, everything was dark and silent. Her hands were gone. Dirty rags were tied around the stumps where her hands had been, already soaked through with blood. She lay on the floor, shivering, the taste of iron in her mouth. Somewhere in the distance, she heard faint chanting again, followed by muffled cries, someone else screaming, begging. Tears streamed down her face. This wasn't a party. This was something else entirely. Something older, darker, and she had become part of it. Time lost all meaning in that basement. Alina didn't know how many hours, or days, passed. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes waking to see one of the guards glaring at her, sometimes hearing muffled music and laughter upstairs, as if another party was happening right above her head. Once, they dragged her up the stairs and forced her to scrub floors, blood seeping through the dirty rags tied to her wrists. They made her carry trays of food to the kitchen, humiliated, barely able to stand. At night, she could hear other girls screaming somewhere deeper in the villa. The sound hollowed her out. And then finally, came her chance. One evening, two guards began shouting at each other near the back entrance. The argument grew louder, their voices echoing down the hall. Alina's heart hammered. She looked at the side door. It was unguarded. Summoning every ounce of strength, she limped toward it, her bare feet slipping on the stone floor. The door creaked as she pushed it open. Cold night air hit her face like a slap. She ran. Every step sent pain shooting up her arms, blood dripping from her bandages, but she didn't stop. She stumbled through a courtyard, climbed a low fence, and tumbled onto a dirt road outside the villa. For the first time in days, there were no guards, no locked doors, just empty desert night. She kept walking, one foot in front of the other. Hours seemed to pass before she saw headlights in the distance. A truck slowed and stopped beside her. The driver jumped out, staring in horror at the sight of her, barefoot, covered in blood, her hands wrapped in filthy rags. "Yalla," he muttered before pulling out his phone. Within minutes, Alina was being rushed to a hospital, sirens wailing in the still night. Bright lights, the smell of antiseptic, the sound of hurried voices. Alina was wheeled into the emergency ward, barely conscious. Doctors and nurses surrounded her, cutting away the filthy rags on her arms. One of them gasped audibly at the extent of her injuries. "She's lost too much blood," another said urgently. They worked for hours to stabilize her. When Alina finally woke up, she was in a white hospital bed, her arms heavily bandaged. A nurse gently explained that her hands were gone, there had been no way to save them. Tears slid silently down Alina's face. She didn't have the strength to speak. When police arrived to take her statement, Alina told them everything: the parties, the villa, the basement, the guards. But the officers exchanged glances and wrote very little down. "This is complicated," one said flatly. "Do you have proof? Names? Addresses?" She tried to explain, but they looked unconvinced. Days passed, and no investigators came. No one asked follow-up questions. Instead, whispers spread among the staff. One nurse told Alina quietly that she had seen men in suits speaking to the hospital director. Then, suddenly, reporters showed up. For one brief moment, the world knew her story. Headlines flashed across social media. Transgender model found mutilated in Dubai. Activists began tagging journalists and tweeting about justice. But just as quickly, the articles vanished. Links went dead. Journalists stopped returning calls. One doctor quietly advised Alina to leave the hospital as soon as she was well enough. "It's not safe for you here," she warned. That night, Alina lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The hospital, which had felt like her salvation, now felt like another trap. She knew she had to get out, not just from the hospital, but from the country. With help from a sympathetic diplomat, Alina quietly crossed the border into a neighboring country. From there, she boarded a flight back to Russia under a false name. In Moscow, she was admitted to a private clinic. Her body was frail, her mind haunted, but she was finally safe, at least physically. And then the story began to spread. At first, just a few activists posted about her case on Twitter and Telegram. But soon, screenshots of her hospital discharge papers appeared on anonymous forums. The words multiple lacerations, bilateral amputation, and assault-related trauma sent shockwaves through the community. Anonymous users began sharing their own experiences. A user calling themselves Rainbowski wrote, "This is not the first time. I know two girls who went missing after being flown to private parties in Dubai. They never came back." Then another nickname appeared, Desert Whisper. He claimed he had once worked as an escort at these events and had seen girls, especially transgender girls, being taken to locked rooms and not returning. He posted blurry, grainy photos, a dark basement, stained floors, a figure lying on its side. The quality was poor, faces not visible, but the setting matched Alina's description. The forums exploded. Some users shouted fake in all caps. Others wrote, "This confirms everything. This is real." A debate raged across threads, some accusing organizers of running a trafficking ring, others insisting that Alina's case was just a rare tragedy. And still, more people kept joining the discussion, each with their own story, some glamorous, some horrifying. The line between rumor and truth grew thinner by the hour. As the days passed, the forum threads grew longer. Some survivors admitted they had been to the same parties, and nothing bad happened. "I signed the NDA, followed the rules, and got paid. I used that money for my surgery. I went home richer. No one touched me." Others were horrified by such statements. "So you're saying it's fine as long as it wasn't you? What about the girls who didn't make it back?" The arguments became fierce. Some users wrote guides: how to protect yourself if you accept such invitations, share your location, have a trusted contact, agree on payment in writing, always keep your passport hidden. But others pushed back. No plan will save you if they decide you're not leaving. You're in a foreign country. You have no power there. Then, two new accounts appeared claiming they had escaped from similar villas. One wrote, "I heard screams coming from the basement one night. I ran. I didn't even take my bag. I knew if I stayed, I would be next." The other posted, "They especially targeted trans girls. It was like we were trophies to them, something exotic, something they could break just because they could." Some readers refused to believe such cruelty could exist, accusing the posters of exaggerating. But for others, Alina's story and these new testimonies were enough to convince them that something deeply sinister was happening behind closed doors. The debate wasn't just about safety anymore. It was about morality. Is taking the money worth risking your life? Is silence enabling abusers? Or is this just the price of playing in their world? No one had clear answers. But one thing was certain. Alina's story had become more than just one woman's nightmare. It was now a symbol of a much bigger, much darker problem. Today, Alina lives far from the glittering city lights she once dreamed of. She avoids cameras. She no longer posts on Instagram. Her body still bears the scars of that night, and so does her mind. When asked if she regrets going, she doesn't hesitate. I would give everything to go back and say no. Don't trust easy money. Don't trust strangers who promise you paradise. And if you ever say yes, have an escape plan. But even with her warning, the cycle continues. Scroll through Instagram today and you'll still see girls posting from the same villas, laughing, sipping champagne, posing with luxury cars. Some come home richer, unharmed, with memories of glittering parties. Others are never heard from again. And that is the most terrifying part, because no one knows which invitation will lead to a poolside party, and which will lead you into the dark. If this story shocked you as much as it did me, let me know in the comments. Do you believe Alina's story, or do you think these are just urban legends? Hit the like button if you want more true stories like this. And don't forget to subscribe, because next time, we're going even deeper.